All right, here's what we're going to do. I have a plan. Wow, there's an echo. That's cool. All right, when people walk in, everybody's going to turn around and say, hey! We're not going to do that. Okay, well, let's get started. Thank you for coming today. It's Friday. Friday, the last day of the conference. It's kind of sad, but hopefully your brains are full of all kinds of good stuff. I'm going to be talking about front-end things with ASP.NET, minimal API. I don't do linear narrative. It's kind of hard with a talk like this. I'm going to wander all over the place, but I'm going to try and keep us on a path. But what I gave this talk in Oslo. The reason I'm saying all this is the Oslo talk was a lot of slides because I had a lot to cover, but I decided for this one, because we're doing a festival thing, that it would be kind of fun to just go for it and make it interactive. So if you have any questions, can't really see you, but just shout them out. I know I'm in Scandinavia, but just pretend that you're in Australia, and you just interrupt me anytime you want. My goal for today is that you learn at least 5 things, and it doesn't have to do with front-end stuff or ASP.NET, but just something. Maybe you'll pick up a little tool tip, maybe you'll pick up a little practice, something with Vue, but hopefully you're going to walk out of here with 5 things, having learned them. So what I'm going to talk about today is this thing right here. This is the ASP.NET Vue 3, whatever, you know, Microsoft naming. It's hard for me to even remember. The Vue starter template for ASP.NET minimal API. And who knows what starter templates are? I'm assuming that you all know what .NET is. When you do .NET New, you can choose from a list of things if you want to get off the ground. You can make your own templates. I work at Microsoft. I'm a developer advocate, so my job is to do things like this. And so what this is a starter template with Vue and ASP.NET minimal API, but then me being me, I decided to take it 10 extra steps and try and get you off the ground and then somewhere into your build process without having to delete a ton of code. If you want to play along, please do. Whip out your laptops. This is easy to do. You can actually deploy a site to Azure before the end of the talk. I know I'm going to, believe it or not. In fact, I'm going to do that, let's see, right now. Well, I'm not going to deploy right now, but I'm going to get into the code. So where are we? All right. So I'm on a Mac, obviously. This is iTerm 2, and here we go. This is iTerm 2, and I have, right off the bat, I have a fun little tool to show you. Let us install the template if we want to. It's going to be .NET New, install, vue.web.starter. And by the way, that little tool that you just saw, if I do that, this is rad. This is a tool called fig.io. Unfortunately, it's for Mac only, but it gives you really cool IntelliSense in the terminal. So you just go to fig.io, and I can't live without this thing. It also will do all the decorations for your terminal. It'll add these prompts. I'm using power level 10K. It configures it for you. It runs up here in the service bar. I don't think they have anything for Windows yet, but the funny thing is right before I came on stage, I got an email that this company had just been acquired by AWS. So I don't know. Is that a good thing? OK, anyway, so we're going to install the starter. And here we go. You can see it goes out to NuGet. Thank God the conference Wi-Fi is working. But now I have the option to do .NET New Vue. In fact, that's what I'm going to do right now. .NET New Vue. And then I'm going to give it the name, -n, CPH. And this is now installing the template on my drive. So we're going to go into here. And let's buy ourselves some real estate. And so now what we have inside this template is we have an app directory. Stop that. We have an app directory. We have a server directory. This is where ASP.NET is. So I'm trying to make this as simple as I can. This is a pretty standard setup if you're doing front-end, back-end API. We're going to take a look at all of these things as we go along. This README is quite extensive, but again, we'll take a look at that later. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into cat package.json so you can see what's in here. So this is, you can see the name, the description. Package.json is at the root of the project. Because you need Node. We're working with Vue. But we're using this mainly for the scripts. So you have npm run dev, npm run start. I'm assuming you all know what npm is. What we're going to do right here is we're going to do npm post install, which is just a little shortcut to, there we go. Isn't that nice? I love that completion. That's all Fig doing that. Anyway, npm run post install. We have now our Node modules installed, which thank God the conference Wi-Fi is being good to me right now. Don't curse it, Rob. So now we're going to run this. Now this is interesting. As this starts, this is ASP.NET starting up. And we get this thing called the SPA proxy. Oh, I missed my zoom on that one. The SPA proxy is the thing that starts. So what I have running here is I have ASP.NET running on port 8000, and right here, I have Vue running on localhost 3000. So there's 2 servers running, and it's managed for you in the background using this SPA proxy thing. What you're seeing right here is Tailwind. Anybody here work with Tailwind CSS? Know what it is? We got one person. Anybody hate Tailwind? Good, we got at least one. That means there's more. Hopefully, I'll get into your brain with Tailwind. So anyway, I had to choose a CSS framework. I decided to do it. Just choose this one. I could have chosen Bootstrap. It doesn't really matter. I had to choose one, and all these frameworks out there, like Rails, Django, Express, a lot of Express frameworks, are all going nowadays to Tailwind. So I decided, what the heck? So anyway, that's it. This is minimal API thing running, and we're going to deploy this to Azure in just a little bit. But now let's hop back over here, because I do want to address the Tailwind thing. I love this. This is a great tweet or little meme that I saw before. It's so perfect. Tailwind is an abstraction, a very light abstraction. This is the last I'm going to talk about Tailwind like this. I'll show you a few little things later on, but Tailwind is just a very light abstraction on CSS, and it tries not to hide it, but what it tries to do is give you some sane defaults. They call it a utility-based CSS toolkit, which I like. Yes, it tends to look really nasty when you're looking at all the things in line there, but once your eyes get used to it, it's really easy. It's just like code like anything else. Okay, why did I make this thing? The funny thing is, we have, if you do installation of .NET, you can do .NET New Web App, you can do .NET New MVC, you can also do .NET New React, and .NET New Angular. Now, I don't know who uses React or Angular. Just kidding. Besides everyone. But we didn't have Vue and we didn't have Svelte. And so, challenge accepted, they said, well, go ahead, Rob. Let's see what you make. And so I did. I went down to San Diego. I met with John Galloway, who's on the ASP.NET team, and we put together 2 starter templates. And it was really easy to do. We just took the boilerplate Vue app, the boilerplate Svelte app, and we just kind of married them together with the SPA proxy. And we ended up with a really fun starter. And I was like, this is neat, but we can do a lot more. That's what I like to do. And so I decided, well, let's see what else we can add here to get people past the initial, like, OK, cool, I've got it on my hard drive. Now what do I do? This is what I've been doing since 2006. This is me at Mix06. I look a little older there. I don't know what happened. I just aged backwards, I guess. This is the Commerce Starter Kit for ASP.NET 2.0. When I contracted to PayPal to do this, and then I was contracted to Microsoft, and they eventually hired me. But this is what I do. I make starter stuff, and I love it. I can't help it. So I'm still doing it after all these years, and I don't feel bad about my career at all. No, anyway, it's been fun. So let's talk about Vue. Does anybody in here work with Vue before? Oh, great. You're all here, so you know what I'm going to be showing you right now. Well, I know there's a few that aren't, so just bear with me if you already know all this stuff. Vue in its most basic form, here just index.html, in its most basic form is just an application that is mounted to a DOM element. That's it. So I have a DOM element ID app by convention. Inside of there, it's all your Vue app. Down below, you can see I'm pulling in create app from Vue, and then I'm creating some data. And we can work with that data, some methods, click things, do all the kinds of stuff inside that element. This is a simple way to do it. I have done this many, many times, and it works. And if you want to do something more compelling, however, you would do something like npm create Vue latest. And this is going to create a whole big project structure for you, including, if you want, end-to-end testing with Playwright, which is something we're going to talk about later on. Anybody here use Playwright? Ah, good. Yay. That'll be a fun one to get into. OK. When you do this now, what you have is you have inside the source directory, you have this full-blown set of things that amount to a front-end application. Lots of .vue files. Each one of those .vue files is a Vue component. It's components all the way up and all the way down. We have a router. We have centralized data stores. We have views, which equal pages. All of this is compiled and pushed together by a tool called Vite. And if you've heard the name Webpack before and people swearing about it, well, Vite is the kind of the new Webpack. It goes a lot faster. It's a little bit more sane. But basically, it's a web server, it is a bundler, it is a package, not a package manager, it is a packager, a compiler, it's a whole bunch of things. So this is the tool that will take your source code inside the source directory, turn it into HTML and JavaScript. Why do we care about this? We care about this because it's a web server, and so is ASP.NET, and that's something we have to keep in mind as we go along through here. This right here is the boilerplate Vue app. This is what you get when you do npm create Vue latest. You get a set of components, you get a basic page right here that you can look at and say, okay, this is how I think Vue works. And then the problem becomes, okay, so I think I can understand we have code inside script, right? This is a traditional Vue component. We have code inside the script tag. We have a template where our HTML goes, a style tag at the bottom with isolated styling, and what's a hello world component? What is a the welcome component? I'm not trying to be mean to the Vue team. I'm just thinking they could do a whole lot more, which is cool because they give you this right here, which is a good starter point. Documentation, community tooling, ecosystem, community, all this stuff. But to me, I don't know how else to put it, it is kind of a navel-gazing moment for the Vue team. It's like, yay, lucky you get to work with our tool. And I think that's neat, but I think they could do so much more. And so what I mean by so much more is, what about like just a header navigation? What about a footer? What about something that you can reuse as you go on? I call this the owl moment, because you're given this tool, right? And you're like, yeah, you did it. Go for it. Build something cool. And you're like, great, what do I do? What do I do? How do I build on this? So that was my guiding, what's the word I'm looking for? That's what guided me when I was building this thing. And let's go take a look at the code. So where are we? This is the code that we just installed. This is the source directory I was just talking about. Zoom out, there we go. This is that source directory I was just talking about. So this is the Vue app right here in the app directory. ASP.NET is down here in the server directory. This again is the template code. And so inside here, let's start with the app.vue. And I'll zoom out again, there we go. Let's do this. Hope you can see the code there. Screens are a little smaller than I thought they would be. So this is the app.vue. This is your layout, or your harness, or whatever you want to call it. This is the entry point for the Vue application. Inside of here, I created a head component, footer component, and then I'm laying it out down below. And to me, this is bleedingly obvious. This is what you would probably do in the future. So the decision I made here was, well, I'm thinking that people, if they're building a front-end application, are going to have header navigation or footer navigation. I think that's pretty standard stuff. Suspense is another interesting one. Suspense is an experimental feature right now, but people are using it everywhere. And not many people know what it does. And not many people figure out that they probably will need to use it at some point. Because what it is basically a wait for the components to render. It has to do with Vue internals. They're going to change it. I'm not going to dive in too deep into it, but it's extremely helpful to overcome race conditions, let's put it that way. So just be warned if you do use it that it could change. And then router view, this is how you render out some pages. So let's go take a look at these components, head and footer real fast. Inside of here, I have organized some basic components. This is the way I do it, because components, as we know, can contain components. So I think of these things as blocks, components that contain components. Think of blocks on a page. You're stacking blocks up and down. Each one is a section. You can use a section tag if you want, or article, whatever. I'll talk about these in just a second. But what we're looking at here is nav, which is another global concern. So inside of here, here's our footer with lots of lovely and amazing Tailwind CSS, which I know this person right here is going to say, see, I told you it sucked, which you'll still be wrong. So yeah, here's the navigation, the global navigation, which is the header navigation. And down here is something interesting. I'm going to come back to this. Down here, I am using this thing called Pina, which is this state store for Vue. I'm going to come back to this in a second. But up here, you can see it's basically all of Tailwind glorifying the header bar. Yeah. So let's go down to the view here, to this page. This is our home page, or our home view, which is just a router endpoint, a view in a Vue app, which is weird. I don't know why they just don't call it pages, but they call it views, whatever. This corresponds to the home page. So up here, you can see that here's the components I was talking about, those blocks. And whoops, we're using them down below here. We're wrapping everything in 1280. And then inside here, we have a hero and resources. This is a standard page layout. And you should be able to look at this and go, oh, I think I know what this dude's doing. He's a little crazy, but I think I can figure this out. So you look at 1280. Inside the 1280 component, you can see it's just a simple div. Now, why would I do a full component just for a simple div? And it's not the code that's in the component. It's what the component represents, which is a 1280 pixel wide centered box or a container. And the fun thing about Tailwind is I have the Tailwind plugin installed here, which gives you IntelliSense, and you can also hover over this, and it gives you the definition of the CSS so you know what's going on. This is the point of Tailwind, because when you're using other frameworks that do more semantic stuff, what's an accordion? You know, like, I don't understand what this drop-down means, right? But in Tailwind, they give you everything in things like max width 7XL, right? What the hell is that? Well, it means I want the max width of this thing to correspond to 7 units on an extra large screen. And so 7 units is 1280 pixels. So you know this because you can hover over it, or you just get used to these units. And that's the one thing that Tailwind does really well. It has these base units that apply to just about everything in terms of sizing, font sizes, padding, margins, all kinds of stuff like that. Also, it does colors for you. So if you wanted to make this, we could do like BG. Whoops, stop that. What did I do? MX Auto, and then BG. So look at this. This is the Tailwind and IntelliSense. So you can see the colors in here are graded by numbers. And they do all this grading for you for the CSS so that it's tonally compatible, which is really neat. So we got slate, we got gray, we got all kinds of colors. We can go woo like that and have a great time. But the IntelliSense is extremely useful. And so anyway, we can apply background coloring to that. All right, where are we? Let's go take a look at the hero. This is fun. So the hero, this is on the homepage. This is the screen, the dummy image you saw, and then you saw the title and whatnot. Don't need to go into all the CSS in here, but what I do want to show you is what we're doing is we're outputting this thing, the doc.title. That doc is a property that is defined here in our component. Property is the thing, obviously, you pass into the component. But down here, we have defaults, which is lorem ipsum dummy defaults. Why do we do this? Because as web developers, we know that when you show a page to somebody, they're going to read it. And they're going to ask you, wait, why did you put that weird word there? What does that mean? Or why did you make that sentence? We're not going to use that sentence. Like, I know, just look past this. You know, no, that's not the avatar that we're going to be using. This is, oh, God. So this is called blocking, and that's what we're going to be doing, lorem ipsum. So this is there by default. But more importantly is we are expecting our object to have a title, HTML, and image. Where do these come from? And that's the interesting thing. I'm going to show you that in just a second. So let's see. Let's go back to the home view. OK, so we took a look at this stuff. And let's go down here to that. So if you work with Vue, you should know what Pina is. All my Vue folks out here, we know what Pina is? Great. Centralized state store. For those who don't know what this is, when you're working with front-end applications, you work with data, obviously, but you tend to work with data in more than one place. So you'll have a component on the home page, and maybe you'll have a component up in the top bar. Maybe it's like a shopping cart. So you want to share data between the things. That data needs to be able to basically throw an event and say, I've updated, so update yourself, components that use me. And so what you have to start doing is you use evented programming or reactive programming. So the data in the Pina store is reactive. So here I'm asking for the content store, and I'm just importing it in. And then here I'm invoking the use content store, and what I am asking for is an action called get documents, and then a state object called documents, which is just an object. And then this is where it gets weird. This took me so long to figure out what the hell that was. Why am I not just assigning a documents variable to the return of get documents? That's not the idiom of doing evented programming. What I'm doing here actually is I am telling the state store, go and get some documents and load up the document state. And so it's doing that, and then I can use the documents down below. This feels like working with global variables to me, and I hate it. I hate it a lot. But I got over it, because this is what you're supposed to do. Why am I pointing this all out? Because this is a decision that I made for you so that you could learn the idioms and keep going. So you don't have to figure out, how do I actually use Pina? Well, here it is. It's all done for you. Let's go take a look really quickly at that store, just so you know what we're doing. Not that, but that. And then we're going to close this, and I'm going to pick this up a little faster. OK, so inside here is just a typical Pina store, state store. It's just a file in the stores directory. You can import it in, file-based. And then now we have some state, we have actions, we have getters, which are read-only things. Inside here, the reason I'm showing you this is I am doing an API call. I'm using fetch. I'm building a URL based on an endpoint, which is, are we in production or not? Passing in a path. I'm going to come back to this, but just keep in mind, I am pinging an API. I'm pinging our API, ASP.NET API, for documents. It's because the documents are coming from a Markdown CMS that I made, which is funny. I told somebody this back at Microsoft, and they're like, Rob, how crazy are you? Are you serious? You made a CMS? I'm like, it's not really. You'll see what I mean in a second. We'll get there. OK, so there's that store. The one last thing I'm going to show you is, as you work with Vue, and you build out your application, you get to a certain point where you're just like, oh, geez, I need social links in the bottom footer, but also I kind of want to put a couple on the top. And I want to just, oh, how can I do the links both at the top and the bottom? Because what most people do is they'll make a footer component or a header component, and then they'll put the data right in the component, which is fine. That's the demos that you see everywhere. But what you end up doing at some point is you're centralizing that into I usually call a site store. And this contains every meta bit of information for your site. Maybe there's a name in here, contact links, whatever, top nav links, social links, and the footer nav. All goes right here. You look at this and you think, OK, well, I'll put it in there. Well, this is a decision, again, that I made to hopefully help you to not have to stumble into this problem later on and grease the wheels and get you going as quick as I can. OK, one last thing I'm going to show you. One last thing. Let's see, where are we? We need to go down to our views. There we are, home view. Down here, this one last. Use SEO. This is interesting. I'm importing this, by the way, up here. Import use SEO from Composables, SEO. And down here, I am invoking this method. And this is another fun one. This is something that, as I've done this 1,000 times, you go to deploy your site, you're really excited, you want to go tweet about it, you put the tweet in your Twitter thing, and you get the gray box with just a simple, some one line of lowercase text that looks like crap. And the marketer calls you and says, dude, why don't you have some picture there? Don't you know what you're doing? Like, oh, right, meta. I need to have meta tags. So that's what I have for you inside of here. This is something that you will need at some point. So this is the use SEO composable. Composables in Vue are like helpers. They're just little global helper functions that you reuse and you reuse throughout your site. I use this in every site I've made. I have deployed a ton of Vue applications, both internal to Microsoft and also external for my own gig, and I use this all the time. When you go to try and figure out how to add meta tags to your Vue application, you'll hit Google, you'll first try and do it yourself. So you go to app.vue, which is your layout, and like, okay, where's the header tag? Where's this thing? And it's not anywhere, right? This is just a component. Components don't have access to the head. And then you go down to index.html, and you're like, OK, I'll just drop it in here. But wait, all the meta tags are page-specific. How do I do this? And then you could invent some hacky solution if you want to. You do that, and finally you look on Google or you read in Stack Overflow that what people typically do is they grab the unhead package, which will inject information into the header, as you see here, right? We're adding Open Graph stuff. We're adding Twitter stuff, title, description, boom, done. I saved you, hopefully, a little bit of time I saved you a little bit of time so you don't have to go and hunt this stuff down. Jet lag is fun. Jet lag is a good time. All right, so I think that is it. Yes, it is. So I'm going to pop back over. Anybody have any questions? Shout it out if you do. It's interactive. It's a festival. I'm not going to sing again, though. I'm not going to do that. OK. All those components that you just saw, you might be looking at the Tailwind stuff thinking, oh my God, if I have to think about how to write all that Tailwind stuff, forget about it. I'm not going to do that. Well, the good news is I got all of that from this site here, which is tailblocks.cc. It's ready-made components built in Tailwind. When I say components, I mean HTML blobs. There are sites like this everywhere, but I like tailblocks.cc because it's super, super useful. They got just about everything. There's also Tailwind UI, which is the paid stuff for Tailwind that you can, from the Tailwind team. I subscribe to that, and I use it all the time. So it's kind of nice. You just go there, grab a block, stick it in your app, and go. Let's talk now about the backend stuff, the ASP.NET Minimal API. We're going to go into the server bits. Has anybody here used Minimal API? Know what it is? Yay! With Tailwind, right? I'm assuming you used Tailwind? No? Okay. Still don't got you yet. All right, I'll get you. Tailwind, or if you don't know, ASP.NET Minimal API takes inspiration from Express and Sinatra and Flask. These are web frameworks from Node, Python, and Ruby. Sinatra was the one to start this whole thing about let's do really super minimalist API stuff. I mean, this is amazing. Look, require Sinatra, get your endpoint. Do is the callback in Ruby. It's a do block. And it just returns some text. Express does the same thing. This API has become standard these days. So the cool thing is the ASP.NET team thought, well, we want to do that too. This is all you need. And we're talking about ASP.NET here, which is, let's say, fiddly. And ceremonial is another word I've heard, where you have to know dependency injection, you have to know what the builder pattern is, singletons and all these other things, right? You have to know these things, which is fine. As developers, we should know our patterns. But they also realize that sometimes you just want to jam together a really quick API. And so they made this, which is great. This is minimal API in action, app.mapget, boom. Demo time again. Let's write some code. Woohoo! Okay. I'm going to pop out of here. Pop out of there. Sure, I'll save it. Why not? I don't know what I just saved. So we'll go into server. And inside here, it is not cool in this room. Is anybody else as warm as I am? Man. OK, so let's start here at program.cs. Again, this is our server. And let's see if I can pump this up a little bit. There we go. This is our server. And it's pretty minimal as far as API things go, or as far as ASP.NET goes. We're starting up here with the builder. We didn't need to do this, but I wanted to add cores. So by default, I've turned cores completely on. So anybody can access your API from anywhere. If you don't want that, turn it off. I also had to set up that we're using static files in here because we're using Vue. And we need to make sure that we can map to index.html because that's going to be the entry point for our Vue application. ASP.NET allows that, right? It'll just hand stuff off there if it cannot solve the route itself, because ASP.NET is going to be your server, or Kestrel is going to be your server when you go to production. Talk about this stuff in a second. This is the CMS thing I told you about. And then down here, I'm simply mapping some routes for the API. And we do app.run. So let's go over here, the API. And this is the routes I was telling you about that I was mapping. If you use ASP.NET, it's kind of up to you how you want to map the routes. With MVC, obviously, you have to have a controller. But with Razor Pages, it's page-based. Well, how do you do it with this framework? It's up to you. In Node, there's a routes directory. And inside of there, you basically use a router. And then you export that router. And then you pick that up in app.js. Here, we're doing something a little bit different. We're just calling app.mapget repeatedly. And we pass in this iEndpoint route builder, which is our app. And then we build out the routes accordingly. One thing I do want to point out is I like the idea of having things as obvious and file-based as I can. So this is in the API directory. It could be in a routes directory, but I figured this is pretty obvious. This is where the API stuff goes. So anyway, inside of here, you'll notice that I'm working with a documents collection, or a documents library, I should say, and then an iList of documents, and then I'm doing a little link action. Go get me a document that has the slug about terms and privacy. And these I'm just returning from this endpoint, API about, and so on. Down below here, I have another one where I am querying a directory entirely, where the directory is equal to whatever you pass in. In our case, on our home page, we're asking for home. Now, where are these things? Well, if we come down over here and look in www.root, into content, you can see them. These are all just a bunch of markdown files. And this is that CMS that I keep talking about. This was meant with some very concerned looks at Microsoft. I'm like, what are you doing? And what I did was I stole this idea from Nuxt content. And Nuxt, the Vue people out here should know what Nuxt is. It is the kind of big framework that's built on top of Vue, very opinionated and convention-based. They have this package you can install called Nuxt content. And what it does is basically just looks at markdown files on the drive and allows you to query them from the front end. I like that idea. I thought, well, we could do the same thing with ASP.NET. And so I made it. And it seems silly. It seems silly until you think about this. Markdown is a great tool. It's like just put it in a directory, and then you can access it on the client. Now, why would we do this? Because when you first start building a site like with Vue, you're going to put your content just probably right in your component, which is an anti-pattern in Vue. So what I mean is you're going to put your HTML, you're going to have H1 tags and P tags, and all your content just right there in the HTML. Eventually, you're going to figure out after your 30th deployment, because of a spelling error, because someone in marketing or sales calls you and says, could we change this to look like this? And they call you again and say, oh, I'm so sorry. My boss looked at this, and can you change it to be this? That is just so, And so what you end up doing is you end up going to a headless CMS, something like Contentful or Prismic or whatever, and plugging that in, and your problems magically go away. So that's what people typically do. But that's after a while. What I wanted to do is I wanted to hit the sweet spot between let's get started in a sane way, and then eventually maybe we'll go to a bigger CMS. But what we really need to do is we really need to take that content out of the HTML. And you might be thinking, Rob, how does this scale, though? Like, I'm still going to have to deploy it. And this is the fun part. I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit, but do you know that people use GitHub as a CMS, a content management system? They do. It's pretty funny. And you think about it, if this is in your source directory, and the people that write the content can have access to it, which I know cringe, but at the same time consider that you're just getting off the ground, you can change it up at GitHub, do a PR, do a review, do all the things you need to do, and you have versioning, you have everything in these Markdown documents. And if you set up GitHub Actions to do your deployment off to Azure, let's say, then all of that's out of your hands. All you have to do is accept the PR for the content change, and you're out of it. So that actually works out really well in the beginning, and I want to make sure that you all understand this is in the beginning. Okay, so really quickly, about terms privacy, right here, you can see they're just Markdown documents. This is called front matter. It's a bit of YAML at the top, privacy, terms, and so on. Here, all of these correspond to little boxes that were on the home page, little feature boxes. We also have the hero, which is the content for the hero. So each one of these are little CMS elements. Now, how do we actually work with this? What's that document thing? You can go in here into models, and you can see that document is just a simple object, or a simple class. And inside here, we have some basic CMS stuff. We're using some YAML serialization, so you can, anything that you put in the front matter gets dropped into your document object. And at this point, if you know anything about CMS, you might be saying, yeah, that's a very simplistic thing. You only have one document type. I have, 10 in my application, and that's great. You can inherit from this if you want. You can make it a partial class. You do you. You have the source code. This just gets you going quickly. All right, so the content library, just breeze through here. This is just giving you some queries. I will say you have a fuzzy search, which just does term matching. That's it. Loads it up, blah, blah, blah. And nothing much to show you in there. It's Markdown and YAML and built out a page. And they all sit in memory, and it's nice and fast. All right, I have a half hour left. That's great. We're going to talk about deployment later. What else did I want to show you? Let's talk about tests. Inside of here, I've added tests, believe it or not. I've added tests. Sorry, I was checking myself. I added tests to this project, which, again, I was met with some funny looks. People are like, Rob, you're supposed to have a test project. You don't put tests in here. I'm like, but outside the .NET world, Go, for example, when you build a Go application, you build it building packages. Each one of those packages come together to build your application. Each package has its own tests inside, and it's just a convention they use. If you do Node workspaces, package-based Node stuff, each package has tests right in it. It just makes life a little easier. So to me, it's just easier to have tests inside your API that test your API. So here, I've just stubbed a few out that test the library. Anyway, it's in here for you, so you can go and start it up and do your own tests as quick as possible. All right, so your program, yes, and let's go take a look inside of here. Now, you might be thinking, but I don't want that test code in production. That's why we have a separated project. And so here, we are making sure that when you go for release, when you do .NET Publish and release this into the wild, all that test stuff is removed. Down here, you can see we have a configuration for the DLLs. When it's not release, we're adding all these DLLs for testing, XUnit, and so on. So none of this stuff goes into production. It's all part of the CS proj file. All right, let's go down here to this. Okay, this is obviously a CS proj, it's MS Build. What we're doing here is really interesting stuff. When we run .NET Publish, we have to have a few things go off. Like, how are these two things? We have two apps, right? Front end, back end. How are these two things going to come together? This is where ASP.NET Core, more specifically the SPA proxy, take over. And they say, okay, well, we're going to build a Vue app. We're going to get the HTML and JavaScript, and we're going to dump it in the www root. The ASP.NET side is already configured to look for index.html, so we have to make sure all that is there on build. So this right here is all the settings for that to happen. No need to ever play with it, just so you know it's there. It's all set up for you. Up above here, if you ever want to change the name of anything, here you can see the SPA root, SPA single page application, is in the one level up app directory. And then down below here, you can see the settings for it. It's going to run at 3000, and npm run dev is a start command. So this is how the SPA proxy and ASP.NET are orchestrating Vue to start at the same time, so you can work in both. But if you change something, like let's say you go in here, we have a watch go off, we have CS files, JavaScript, JSON, and you change the markdown, it's going to hop the back end, hot reload the server. ASP.NET's going to reload, but your front end isn't. I mean, we still haven't figured out how to make that happen. We're working on it, though. But anyway, all you got to know is that you have to hit Control-R to refresh, and so on. All right, I think that is all I have for this. Uh-oh, Kirsty's here. Don't look at her. I'm in trouble. She's coming to remove me from the stage. I didn't mean it. No, don't go ahead, please. Love you. Oh my gosh, I made her feel bad. Let's see, is there anything else in here I want to talk about? I do not believe. I will point this out real fast. We have a Docker file, just in case I forget it during our deployment thing. This was made by Aaron Wislang. So this will actually build your front end, your back end, jam it all down into a Docker image, and you can deploy it wherever the heck you like. It took him a while to figure this out. I was impressed. I mean, I know Docker a little bit, but you know, he did an amazing job. Okay, so I think that is it for the server. I talked a little bit, of course, about working with Vite and ASP.NET. We don't need to talk about that much anymore. But there is a mental shift you need to understand, that when you do deploy this, this becomes an ASP.NET application. What we have effectively done, if you're trying to wrap your head around why would I use Vue, why would I use Svelte, why would I use whatever, because what you're basically doing is you're ripping Razor pages out, you're ripping that front-end stuff out, and you're replacing it with a Vue application. So the Vue engine's now gone, and now you have to replace it with Vue or Svelte or whatever, and now we have one single application that's going to go up into the cloud. Let's talk about Svelte. Really quickly want to touch on this. Svelte and Playwright. I like this slide. That made me happy when I put that together. Okay, I'm going to jump out of here, and let's go back all the way over here. Does anybody here use Svelte? Know what it is? Whoa. Okay, one person. Svelte, I know, it's like really another JavaScript front-end framework. Do we need one? Of course. Life wouldn't be complete unless we had choices. What Svelte is it does almost everything the same as Vue. If you like Svelte, then this is also the Svelte starter kit. So you can install this in the same way. .NET New install Svelte, or svelte.web.starter, which is the thing I made. It'll bring this whole thing down. You get exactly the same functionality, same components. If you come down here, you can see we have a little bit of a different way of handling the data. We're still fetching stuff. And then down here, we have a 1280 wrap. We have sections with hero, blah, blah, blah. It's all the same stuff, but I do want to show you this one difference, which is this right there. This is the way Svelte works. It's more like a JavaScript view engine, for lack of better words. What you do when you make a Svelte app is you build everything out. You have Vite running in the background again. It's building it for you and then hot reloading your front end. But when you're done and you build it, there is no runtime library, or no core library, I should say. So that what you get back is vanilla JavaScript and vanilla HTML, which tends to make things smaller. It also makes things faster. So Svelte is actually very fast. The documentation for Svelte is amazing. It's a whole walkthrough where you build out a whole Svelte app. It's a little weird, I will say, a little strange in some spots. Like if you go to your components, and if we go into Hero, you declare your properties using export let, which is strange, but you get used to it, I guess. But anyway, that's Svelte. The reason I'm showing all this is there's one massive difference. Well, number one, I'm showing you so you know it's there. Oh, and they also do page-based routing, which is cool. I added Playwright. And Playwright, I think I asked if anyone here has used it. Playwright is an end-to-end testing framework, which is so fun to use. Not only will it test your code, it'll make the interaction of your site better. Better for people that use assistive technology, which unfortunately a lot of us think not enough about. Let's put it that way. So here, just really quickly, we are doing test.describe. You can see I have the little arrows over here. Click to run tests, which is neat. You can also run a debugger in here, which is also neat. This is because I have the Playwright plugin installed, so it'll run straight from VS Code. I don't like to do that. I'm going to show you what I do instead in just a second. But if you use any node-based testing frameworks, this is going to look familiar to you. And as we come down here, you can see we have a describe block, we have a before each. Stop that, go away. We have a before each, and then we have a go to. And so what this is doing is it's going out and it's loading a page in memory. It's pulling that HTML in. And then it's injecting each one of these pages into the test below. Because I have an API, I have to tell the page to wait for a response from the API endpoint. So that's important. And so once that's done, the page is then handed off. And down below here, you can see our expectations. I'm checking the title. But down here, what I'm doing is I'm using what's called a locator, page get by role. There's a number of things I can do with this. I can come in here and say page.get by attribute, alt text placeholder, blah, 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 blah. I can go in there and do a bunch of things inside the DOM to find the thing I'm looking for. Now, you might be thinking, big deal. You know, why do I care about this? You care about this because who here knows what a role is when it comes to a DOM? Not a lot of people do. You ever heard of ARIA stuff? When you look at these tags and you see something like ARIA label? ARIA is a big deal because ARIA stands for Accessibility-Rich Internet Application. And when you start working with ARIA tags in your code, you're making your site usable for people that have vision issues, that need to use accessibility stuff inside of the browser. So I'm going to show you this real fast because I think this is wonderful. So I'm going to go over here to Firefox. This is my blog. And what I wanted to show you is the way that people, and so I'm here in the accessibility tag inside DevTools, and this is the way that people using assistive technology use your site. This is what they see. They see a document, they see some generic thing at the top, which isn't described, so they don't know what it is, but they'll see, oh, this is the main area. And if I come down here, oh, I can see a heading. And that heading has the name, whatever's in the site. And so this is the way that Playwright sort of pushes you now to decorate your application so you can then test it. Why would they do that? Because Playwright uses headless browsers. You can't see anything. So it only makes sense that you would use assistive technology to then interrogate your application, which is great, because if you do that and you want to test your site better, that means you have to go add ARIA stuff to your site, which makes a better experience for everyone, and I love that. Anyway, let's go back over here. You can see down, after we get the page get by role, we can expect it to be visible, that we can see it, and blah, blah, blah. OK, so this is more of a unit testing way of doing things, but what Playwright is an end-to-end testing, and I wanted to quickly show you this. This is the way I've been using it, is when you do true end-to-end testing or user acceptance testing, you have to script exact interactions. So you can't be afraid of going to an exact page saying, I want to see 3 feature boxes or 6 feature boxes. My title should be this. And so, big deal. That's what you want as a programmer, but what about your users? And this is when you think, oh, I should be writing a story. And so you come up with a bunch of characters in a story, like Anya here. Anya is an experienced front-end developer. She doesn't know about Playwright very much. And so when she visits my post on my site, this is what I expect her to see and how I expect her to interact. You can have Playwright click buttons for you, fill out tags, log people in. There's a whole bunch of authentication you can do. And what you end up with is this long, wonderful script that describes Anya or somebody on your site. Last thing I want to show you is something that I learned from my colleague. If you open up the command palette, it's Command-Shift-P on a Mac, Control-Shift-P on Windows, and you type in terminal. Did you know you could create a new terminal in the editor area? I love this so much because I do not like the terminal stuff that you get in VS Code. It's always just kind of shoves everything to the side, but I like having it in the editor. It makes things easier. Why am I doing this? Because I want to show you something that's really neat. If you run npx playwright test UI, I know it's just a bunch of white noise here, but when you start running these tests, the reason it's this way, by the way, just quickly, is something on my machine broke last night. So I had a whole demo where I was going to show you this testing thing working, going, look, it works. And it broke. But it's worth it to show you that this testing window is amazing. It's a Chrome-based web app, but inside of here you can do so much with it. And when you run the test, it actually takes snapshots of the page over time, and you can see each snapshot up there, and you can see what the user sees during the test, which I think is great. All right, that is it for Playwright. And let's go back over here to my slides. If you want to learn more, Playwright is a Microsoft project. I am a Microsoft employee. However, I do still do courses and videos. I will never stop doing that, so I do that on my own. I have this video course I did on Nuxt and Vue. It's got a book and blah, blah, blah. One of the videos I did was this one. It's over an hour long. If you want to take a look at it, it's totally free. I can't charge for this because I'm a Microsoft employee. But it's totally free. It's an hour plus where I get into actually doing full testing on this. And if you want to snap a picture of the QR code, it'll give you a link. Tell me if you have problems with that. I'll show the QR code again at the end for anybody who didn't get one. So Playwright, I can't say enough about it. It's going to sound snarky of me, but it amazed me that Microsoft could make VS Code and Playwright. They're just amazing tools. Oh, that sounded snarky. OK, let's talk about deployment. I have just enough time left here to deploy and then also take any questions we have at the end. OK, so we're going to come over here. And this is our Svelte app. And this is where I want to be. And the Docker file, right there. All right, inside the server directory, we have a deployment directory. Inside here, we have an Azure directory. And inside here, I'm going to get rid of this, not that, and that. Quickly going to delete that. These are going to be generated for us, is why I'm doing that. I have this app service shell script. I'm going to talk about this in a second. But first, what I'm going to do is I am inside the server directory. I have make. I have a make file in here because make is awesome and I love it. I'll tell you why it's there in just a second. Make app service. What this is going to do, make just basically executes shell scripts for you. What this is going to do is it's executing my app service shell script. It's right now, it's calling up to Azure, and it's creating all the resources we need to deploy this site. I have made a number of decisions in here. And the decisions are all based around what I know people do when they use starter templates like this. They want to get off the ground, up and running as quick as they can. So here, the decisions I've made is we can do Git deployment later. We can do GitHub Actions later. Right now, we probably need on day one to get a site up and running so we can show our client or our boss or somebody that we're working. And then we're going to do rapid iteration as time goes on. So to that end, I am using zip deployment, where I'm zipping everything up and just shoving it up to Azure, because it's probably just me on this project as I get started. Maybe this is a side gig you're working on. Maybe it's your startup idea. So that's what we want to do. Inside the app service shell script, and by the way, quickly, Aaron Powell, my colleague, is working on getting Bicep and AZD. AZD is a developer CLI. We're getting all of that put together to put in here. I'm just being a big fat baby about it because I have a very particular way that I want to see it done, and so Aaron is very kindly putting up with my crap. Like, no, I don't want Bicep files everywhere. I want it right here. And he's like, God, Rob. I'm like, it's me. Anyway, quickly to go through here, this app service shell script, you have a couple of things to set up above here. It reads just like PowerShell. It works in PowerShell, so you can use this directly. All of this stuff is commented. So down below here, for instance, you have to pick a SKU for your app service plan. What do you pick? Well, here's a link for you. You can go look at pricing details. I would normally do F1 free, so you know that when you deploy this yourself, you're getting a free upload, or free deployment, I should say. But I already have a couple of free Linux things on my subscription, so I can only have one. So anyway, I had to use B1. Quickly down below here, we're just executing the Azure CLI, AZ. And you have to be logged in, of course, with an Azure account. And then down below here, one thing I want to show you is something that is not done. Woohoo! Deployment off. Look at that. All right, this is going to come up in a second. I'll come back to that. Down here, I am enabling the web application to have logs, which is not set up for you by default if you're going through the portal, right? Or if you do the deployment and you're going through the tutorials, it doesn't really talk about setting up logging, but we all need logging, don't we? We want to know what's going on. So here, I'm making sure that we have all the logs that we need in here to know what's happening. So finally, down below here, what I'm doing is, after I build all the resources on Azure, I'm now creating the deployment scripts that you're going to use repeatedly. And that is the zip.sh. I called it zip because it's for zip deployment. If you want to do GitHub deployment or Git deployment, you can create your own, whatever. I also have a logs script right here, which is just AZ web app log tail, so you can see what's happening with the application. These are just little shortcuts for you. If you like make, which you should, inside here I have make targets for each one of these things just to make life easier. So for instance, right now, when you come over here to check your deployment, you're like, dude, Rob, you said, what's with all the errors? Unfortunately, this is something that I've known for a while. I'm working with the CLI team on this really quickly. There's a bug in our Python code. It has to do with just when we call logging. What used to happen is the site would deploy, it would come up, and then the log files would start streaming so you know you're up. But unfortunately, I have to kill this process and then do make logs. And we're going to connect to the Azure logging thing unless conference Wi-Fi lets me down. Don't let me down, please. Come on. Okay, could you all turn off your Wi-Fi? Anybody understand? Yeah, there we go. Someone, there we go. Woo! Okay, so we're up. So the cool thing is now our site's up, right? So if we've got a little project we're running and our boss says, I need a site up, like now we need to blah, 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 you have deployed this on day 0, which I think is neat. And you can sit here and look at the logs and see what's going on. So you have now gone to what I like to think of as a good spot when you're using a starter template. Okay, live log stream is up, which means we are up right now, which is great. We are up on Azure, and boom, yay. I know you're thinking, great, Microsoft guy doing a deployment demo on stage, but still, this is what you can do with this template right now. I just installed this and deployed it. It took me all of 6 minutes. Okay, I'm looking at time. I am doing good. I'm very proud. All right, so that is deployment. Last thing I want to say, and then we can have some questions. In Oslo, I had a ton of questions, so I'm saving a little extra time for them here. You can make your own templates. A lot of people don't know this, and I don't know why, but you can make templates for anything, anything .NET related. If you want to do that, I have a repo up here. I wanted to call this a .NET template just because, I don't know, it's neat. Anyway, it is up on GitHub, and you can go download this code, and what it will do is it'll show you how to create a starter template. And you might be thinking, why would I want to do that? Well, think about for your own internal company, maybe you have boilerplate that you tell everybody, oh, just go clone this repo, blah, blah, blah. You could do that, but what a starter template does is it pulls from NuGet. It gets versioned, right? You have a README in there, but when people do .NET New, let's say my project, and they give it a name, that name is replaced in everything inside the project, which is nice, because then you can name everything and not have to go through and clone the repo, bring it down, change all the naming, doing global find and replace. Anyway, this is up here for you if you want to take a look at it, including all kinds of instructions in the template file. One thing I forgot to mention too, and I want to mention really quickly, is inside of here, I mentioned this README before. This is one of the things that I like to do. I don't ever like to assume people know what I'm talking about, or, well, I don't want that either, but I don't want to assume that people know what is going on. So in here, we have a README that tells you everything. This is the README that's up on the NuGet page. Also, inside server, inside deployment, we have a README that goes through everything I just talked about with you here and how to deploy and what it all means. So hopefully, that'll get you up and running quickly. That is it for me. Here's that is that QR code again. And I have a favor to ask. I don't mind red cards at all. Please vote. Please drop your stuff in there. I do not mind them. It's how I learn. Green helps the organizers know that I did a decent job, and they can invite me back. I am done. As I mentioned, we have a few minutes left here before lunch, but if you have any questions, please let me know. And that's it. Okay, shout them out. Anything? Anything? Anyone? Oh, my God. Yes? Say that one more time. Oh, cool.
Do you have some documentation on how to add authentication?
Authorization, yeah. So, I was hoping to have that done. So in Oslo, I showed this, and I talked about a roadmap, and we are going to add authentication. And I was hopefully going to say, and today announcing, but it's hard. And let me put it this way. I wanted to do JOTs, or JavaScript Web Tokens. I wanted to enable this with the back end. But that gets weird when you're working with Vite on the front end. That Vite wants to take over a lot of things in terms of the back end. So anyway, we're getting there. Because not only do we have that, but we also have about, I think it's the last count, 20 million different ways of doing identity management with Azure and Microsoft stuff. So there's a bunch of libraries that I have to figure out internally which one to use. We've narrowed it down, and I was about to put it together, and I couldn't do it, so I punted the whole thing to John Galloway. And so he is now working on this. And so hopefully in the next few months, we'll have an authentication story. We've decided we want to have 1, 2, or 3 of them. The last thing I want is for you to have to download this and then have to go pay a subscription for something. I want it to be free, because this talk is not only for Microsoft people that understand .NET, but it's also for people outside the Microsoft world that want to come in and check out ASP.NET, which they should, because it's an amazing framework. So yeah, we're trying to make it easy. So hopefully I answered your question. It's coming. Anyone else? Man, you guys are going to let the Norwegians ask more questions than you? Come on. All right. Good enough. Go eat lunch. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.